truckers are beginning to be arrested, but have already sparked a global protest movement. Will the continuing trend of leaders condemning these protesters as a minority, as racists, as deplorables and undesirables work, or will the truckers hold the line? Hello there, you 4.9 million wonders existing beyond labels and condemnation. Welcome to the revolution that you started, that you're participating in. What's going on with these Canadian truckers? Arrests have been made, and as I always say, if there is any evidence of wrongdoing, racism, violence, I obviously condemn it outright without question or doubt. But what seems to be happening at the moment is a movement is emerging around these protests. People want their voice to be heard. It's becoming a worldwide movement. In this video, we're asking, along with the help of the writer Matt Taibbi, why did leaders begin to condemn huge portions of the population as being deplorables, undesirables? What's with the media never accurately reporting the numbers of people that are protesting? What is the strategy here? Remember, you can tell me in the comments below what you think the strategy is. Let's break this down a little bit. This is from Matt Taibbi, as we've said, in Substack. From Brexit to the election of Donald Trump till now, the descent of thousands of Canadian truckers upon the capital city of Ottawa to confront Trudeau, a consistent theme has been the refusal of leaders to admit, not even to us, but to themselves, the numerical truth of what they're dealing with. Not even to themselves. That's actual denial, isn't it? I've seen enough of your videos and your comments and the stuff you at me in and link me to know that there are protests all over the world and continually, whether it's the yellow vests in France or what's going on in Australia or wherever in the world, they underreport it. I suppose because protests are catching. Strikes are catching. If people begin to recognise that by coming together they can change reality, well, I wonder what might happen. So the mainstream media, in cahoots with their partners in big business and government, continually and deliberately underreport. Trudeau is becoming the ultimate example. Canadian truckers are reportedly 90% vaccinated, above the country's 78% total. A key detail that's been brazenly ignored by media in both countries, determined to depict these more as anti-vax than anti-mandate protests. If anything, they're pro-vaccine. They've been vaccinated at a level higher than the national average. Now just take that to the bank with you. Let's apply a similar degree of circumspection when we're told what else they might be. From underestimating to overreacting to needlessly insulting, underestimating, then overreacting, then needlessly insulting. What is this trajectory of behaviours to trying to steal legitimate donations? I mean, that was bang out of order, wasn't it, that? What's the deal? That's totalitarianism. What I think offends me about this is that Trudeau, I don't know loads about him, but he's exactly the kind of dude that you'd see on the news saying, I'm anti-totalitarianism, I'm anti-fascism, I'm anti-racism, although some pictures suggest it's not entirely his deal. And I agree with that. I'm anti-fascist, I'm anti-totalitarian, I'm anti-racist. So what I tend not to do is nick people's GoFundMe money or shut down people's Facebook page, because do you know what? I'm willing to have the conversation. I'm willing to be wrong, and I'm willing to talk to people that are wrong. And that way, collectively, through our shared consciousness and our shared public discourse, we might arrive at something resembling truth, rather than arriving at something resembling oppression, censorship, pursuit of the objectives of the powerful, condemnation, perjurizing a group of people that a couple of months ago, the truckers are heroes. They're doing the essential work, delivering the necessary medicines to keep our economy and our nation alive. God bless the truckers. What? The truckers don't want mandates? The truckers are villains. To levelling accusations of treason, sedition, occupation and insurrection. These are pretty powerful words to bandy around. Canadian authorities did everything but the obvious move, meeting protesters head on and negotiating with them in realistic terms. That's the culture you want to be in, right? Like, what I sometimes think when I see the rise of puritanism, authoritarianism, an inability for people to have a conversation or be rehabilitated or forgiven or wrong, I think, like, even if people are wrong, you can still talk to them. Like, you know, I don't agree with what you're saying there. I don't agree with it. Should we have a conversation about it rather than, you're wrong, there's an eliminate you from reality? What kind of, where's that lead? How does that work? How's that ever going to work? It will not work. It's not reality. It's detached from reality. You don't have to agree with them, but you do have to deal with them, which in this case means giving up the fantasy that your opposition is small or fringe. The incredible thing about politicians like Trudeau is that they genuinely seem sure their opposition is limited to small extremist pockets. This is how we get to a place where over half of America is reflexively denounced as racist or white supremacist. Another brilliant American political fashion adopted by Trudeau, who last year denounced anti-vaxxers as misogynists and racist, saying that people that are anti-vax are racist and misogynist. Those are not a set of values that go together. What defines you? Well, one thing, I don't like vaccines. Anything else? Yeah, women, and I'm racist. Why would that be a thing? This delusional blindness has been on display all over the world for at least 6 or 7 years now. Trump won, and the excuses that piled up were legend. We had Matt Taibbi on our podcast, Under the Skin, where we talked about these issues, and it seems that the rise of populism is obviously congruent with people noticing that existing political models aren't representative of their views. Populism is a real threat to the establishment. In order to diminish that threat, you have to ally populism with a set of beliefs, which in some cases it may naturally be allied with. There may be nationalism, there may even be racism. But to say that populism, because I would consider myself a populist, i.e. what I believe is that ordinary people should have control over the means of productions, the means of control, the means of communication, that we should have actual, real democracy. That's what I believe in. The population, the populare, should have control of their own resources. I don't agree with racism. I don't agree with nationalism. I don't agree with any of those ideas. And it's pretty clear to me now that whether it was Trump or Brexit or what's happening now in Canada, there is a tendency to amplify particular narratives in order not to protect us from these terrible and obviously wrong ideas in some cases, like we know with racism, for example, but instead to diminish and undermine the entire protest because the protest is a threat to the establishment. We were told the true victorious result had simply not been allowed to come out thanks to a conspiracy of cheaters whose ranks kept growing as more truths were uncovered. It was the fault of the New York Times, Macedonian troll farms, misogynists, deplorables, WikiLeaks, Assad, suburban women lacking gender consciousness, Bernie bros, Bernie himself for not campaigning hard enough, Facebook, Twitter, and most importantly, Russians. Yes, I know that Donald Trump has spent over a year now crisscrossing the country denying his 2020 electoral defeat, but that's the point. Supposedly smart people mock him for that when they spent years doing the same thing and somehow don't think that's weird at all. So right, if you think Trump's denial of the outcome of the 2020 election is wrong, then you would have to think that the 2016 farrago was also wrong, and vice versa, right? The many related stories of populist uprisings, from Trump's win to the ascent of Jeremy Corbyn, to the protests to Brexit, establishment politicians kept searching for the certainly illegitimate and probably foreign source of their problems. Meanwhile, the real issue was usually a simple two-step progression in which people all over the planet first just disliked their leaders, then reacted badly to being called racist traitors for saying so. Of course, I would not deny the reality of racism, but I would also not deny the reality that leaders are unpopular because they are out of touch with the people that they govern and are condemnatory of them. And it's pretty clear there's a whole professional class of media, reporters, journalists, TV media that just hate ordinary working people and then try to reverse engineer a reason for that hatred, mistrust and suspicion. From there, in a process that snowballed for years, the neoliberal commentariat gradually widened the definition of deplorables and unacceptables. This is a time where stuff's happening around language that's weird. I don't mean the identity stuff. I'm pretty sympathetic to that. I mean stuff like where anti-vax now means anti-mandate. Like, definitions are changing. And we've also got an interesting video coming up around how the term terrorism can be applied to misinformation, so watch out for that. Their relentless propaganda campaigns have given most of the world an out-group identity by now. Even a growing segment of the intellectual class and their leaders still act like there's a cellar somewhere in which all their detractors can be stuffed, instead of just treating them like legitimate political actors whose complaints need to be dealt with. Emboldened, another convoy is now organising to descend on Washington. The hashtag Truckers Convoy 2022 already has millions of interactions, and the main Facebook groups have gained 200,000 members in 2 weeks. Hopefully that won't be banned and cancelled. Oh, it has been. That's good. Always a sign that you're living in an open democracy when certain viewpoints are completely cancelled. They're coming, but it seems like the only thing our thinking classes can think to do in response is mass-produce news stories denouncing everyone involved as neo-Nazi QAnon loons, basically a repeat of Trudeau's fringe approach, which itself is inherited from anti-Trump narratives. Not that there weren't things that I explicitly disagree with about Trump, his campaigning, etc. But the problem, I believe, is when you denounce like 50% of a population in ways and terms that are undeniably bad to prohibit them being participants in a debate, a conversation about what is essentially their democracy, along with everyone else's democracy. That's what democracy means. By the time these people realise that what they're dealing with is bigger than a caricature, it'll be too late. There has never been a plan for dealing with the Trump phenomenon or levers or any other populist uprising in the modern era. All our leaders have come up with are strategies of suppression and containment, combinations of policing, surveillance, censorship and propaganda. And even the propaganda is mostly just mocking. Obviously, when I'm covering a subject like this, I know that, like last time, there will be some pushback, even people saying Russell Brand's right-wing because he supports the truckers. Now, I don't believe I am right-wing. I also don't think those labels matter anymore. Right-wing, left-wing, you know, it's the angel in the middle that matters. It's the crow between the wings that's important to us, and it's important that we keep our conversation going. Who knows? There probably are members of that protest that hold some pretty crazy views about all sorts of stuff. But if we continue to delegitimize an entire movement, how are we going to get anywhere? And in fact, isn't condemning an entire group because of the behavior of one or two individuals one of the key components of bigotry and prejudice? Oh, well, all people from this place or appear in this way or identify in that way are like this. No. Over and over, we're told the one thing we need to know about the opposition is that it's insane, wrong, and won't get anywhere, which brings us back to the Freedom Convoy. Virtually every news story that's come out about the Canada protests has focused on bad behaviour of individual protesters, or polls showing their supposed unpopularity, or news linking leaders of QAnon and the vaccine scepticism, and even Holocaust denial. Editors now routinely make sure that the word convoy is surgically attached in headlines to delegitimizing rhetoric, as in The Independent's Freedom Convoy pushed by QAnon, or NBC's As US Truckers Convoy Picks Up Momentum, Foreign Meddling Adds to Fray. Wow, it's almost like there are a set of pre-existing narratives that can be bolted on to delegitimize any protest. To me, what it seems like from an overview is democracy has become tainted. You can't get any access through democratic means by voting because you know by now that both parties are completely controlled by lobbyists. So you protest in order to have your voice heard. But protests are always dismissed, diminished, badly reported upon. What's left? They won't rest until nothing is left. That's why this has to be effective. That's why this convoy has to be successful. Not just for people who agree with them, but for all of us. Because the alternative is the closing down of legitimate means of protest. I'm not saying there aren't people in any protest that are bad actors. Of course there are. In any room with 100 people in it, you're going to get all sorts of variety. But the fact is that if 90% of these truckers are vaccinated, it ain't anti-vax, it's anti-mandate, and they do have the right to protest. Centre-left leaders around the world seem more interested now in defending the principle of not listening than in the practical question of amping down tensions, a logistical problem that in this case needs to be solved somehow sooner rather than later. A mass covering of official ears while shouting QAnon Holocaust derp isn't going to get it done, and sending in the military is pretty much guaranteed to work about as well as it did in the Middle East. What's happening in Canada and other countries seems less about specific demands than about the general principle of being listened to. Leaders like Trudeau could likely make this thing go away if they'd make even a slight gesture towards the idea that legitimate differences of opinion exist on questions like mandates, vaccine passports, surveillance tracking, lockdowns, the vaccination of children, and other matters. You don't have to agree with people, just find a way to look at them without betraying your profound regret they were ever born. The longer this convoy phenomenon goes on, the clearer it becomes that none of the leaders involved knows how to do this. They're not choosing to govern without listening, they just don't know any other way. But there has to be another way, doesn't there? And we have to find that way. We have to abandon labels, we have to abandon judgment and condemnation. And the more you disagree with what someone is saying or what they appear to believe in, the more important it is that you come to them with an an open heart. We have to create new systems of communication, new systems of democracy. And what we can see from the truckers, the reporting on the truckers, and the behavior of government in countries where protests are becoming popular is you will not get that change within the current systems. So it necessarily has to come from outside it. It is also important that we as individuals remain open-minded, open-hearted, free from bigotry and prejudice. No room, no place for that anymore. We have to reach out lovingly to one another and participate in new forms of protest, always peacefully, of course, new means of democracy, always representative, of course, and new ways of communicating, always with the admission that we have our own prejudices, flaws, and challenges, but we enter into discourse with good faith and open hearts. But that's just what I think. What do you think? Hit me up in the comments below. Do you think this could be a global movement? Could we be changing the world forever? Do you think it's possible for governments and the media to start approaching these protests in a different way, more open-hearted, in good faith? Let me know. Let me know. Hit me up. Give this channel a subscribe because we're in a very vital moment right now. And if you like this video, have a look at this one. Or indeed this one. It's important to me that you watch it. Please sign up to my mailing list as well so I can stay in touch with you. You know I'm touring all over the gaff. I'm all over the UK in fantastic venues. There's a link in the description. Most importantly of all, if you can, stay free.